Let's talk about the importance of saying what matters. I'm Justin Hitt with Inside Strategic Relations. If you want to be more persuasive, connect with prospects and buyers in your marketplace, and gain influence in your career, the words you choose matter. Now, I'm not perfect at this, but I'm using a methodology called podcasting to get out small lectures and lessons that I focus on particular customers, hiring managers, and people in the marketplace. Now, the system I'm using has 179 minutes left as far as what I can store on the web server that delivers these content. It's not an unlimited number of words. I, on purpose, limit the amount of space I have to speak. Now, why is that important? Your customers, the people you want to influence are extremely busy. And if they're not busy, they ought to be busy doing something of value. And if you can, in the fewest words possible, help them go in the right direction, that's why we a lot of times talk about converting your subject matter expertise into consulting services, books, or reports so that you can guide people because they want guidance. They have problems to solve. But if you can do that in as few words as possible, with as much clarity as possible, then you will be seen as an expert in the marketplace. Now, I try to do that in every podcast. I write an outline. I focus on what I'm going to say. I focus on what you're supposed to achieve from the podcast itself so that you get something of value. So, for example, here, it's about the importance of brevity. Now, I don't always do that with clarity, and I don't always do that short. Sometimes I'm a little long-winded. My point being, though, is that by practicing, I am much better today than I was 5 years ago, than I was even a year ago. My focus today is keeping your attention so that you can receive valuable insights and tips to move forward in your progression as a leader, as a small business owner, as an executive, as somebody who wants control and influence over the environment around them. I focus specifically on the audience. When you speak with an executive, it's a different language, a different pace, and a different context than when you speak to a subordinate or you speak to a peer. Now, we can't make the mistake of screening the language so that we're giving the executive information that's not accurate, or we're spinning the story in such a way to make us look good. That's what a lot of middle managers do, and it's a problem. It actually will hurt you in the long run. And we don't want to be giving things to our subordinates that makes them feel like subordinates. I use the descriptive language of subordinate, but it could be a teammate, it could be someone else. The descriptive language is being used here so that you understand your position, that you are a leader, that you are somebody who has to take control of the environment enough that to get whatever tasks at hand done. But again, if you use that language with the people who work for you, it may not go over very well. So again, I'm limiting the amount of space I have to speak. I'm focusing specifically on an audience, and I'm delivering something that has actionable value right now today. So if all you got out of this podcast is to write a brief outline before you make phone calls, or a brief outline before you get up in front of an audience to speak, you'll be tremendously better as a speaker. Another thing to understand is that your audience has needs and desires beyond your existence. Now, I know we all think we are the center of the universe, which in many ways you are because you perceive the world through your lenses. But if we can understand how the other person perceives the world, we can very often gain influence faster. Now, again, this is not a manipulation technique. The emphasis of what we teach here is strategic relationships. We want to listen to the other person, not to find some detail we can use against them, but to better understand their situation, their experiences, and how we might be able to help them. Now, we don't necessarily serve everyone in the marketplace. Serve is being servant, and servant very often ends up being a slave. We are mutually working together to create value that advances both of our interests. They get what they want, you get what you want. Together, you create the synergy necessary to develop systems, to develop approaches, to develop solutions that have long-term value. Some of the tenets that we talk about in this newsletter and the services that I provide include controls. How do we use language to control the environment? Are we de-escalating a situation? Are we escalating a situation? Are we building passion in our audience so they take action? Or are we just informing them? Unfortunately, a lot of people, because they don't give themselves time restrictions, because they don't build a framework or an outline to what they present, they go all over the place. We talk about lifestyle. The majority of the people you interact with have a certain lifestyle that they like to retain, and they also have a certain aspiration about their lifestyle. If you understand these things, you can better motivate the folks that you work with. You can better support the executives' decisions or help influence those decisions so they can continue. What we're talking about right now is communications. Your voice, your written communications, how you present yourself, the both verbal and nonverbal communications matter. These things present you in an environment as somebody of value or as a nuisance. So what do? We focus on optimization. We want to improve our speaking. And again, there's Toastmasters, there's actually doing podcasts, there's being a guest on people's podcasts. If you serve an affluent market, if you've got executive level experience, if you've been a director in an organization, if you have operational risk experience, I'm interested in interviewing you. I can interview you for the podcast, or I can interview you as part of the courses and materials that we have, or even as part of the private member sessions that we have when I work with clients and coaching folks. The key is practice. Have that conversation. Take 5 minutes and have the conversation. Now, what you don't want to do is eat up people's time practicing. You want to have meaningful conversations. You want to connect with people. You want to do things of interest. Now, once you've connected with somebody, we want to start automating the value we deliver. And how do we do that? Well, we take a few notes about the individual. We use a contact management system. If you are a selling professional, a business owner, or executive, you're probably going to have what's called a customer relationship management system. We're going to take notes about the conversation. You know, you're not going to be sitting in an airport somewhere talking on a phone and then hang up the phone and get on a plane, because you're not able to digest that conversation and to make sure you're really truly understanding the needs and values of the other person. As we increase our understanding, the automation becomes easier because we can write letters, for example. If we wrote a letter, and imagine this, every letter you've written is both saved in your email system, but also outside your email system in some kind of content vault. Now, the email systems might change from time to time. You may have retention policies and rules that content goes away after a certain period of time. But the gist of your conversation, if those notes are available in a journal, in an engineering notebook or somewhere, you're going to be able to evidence decisions. You're going to be able to go back and reference conversations in the past. You'll be able to abstract information that you can use as positioning and leverage in the marketplace. I've known engineers that maintain notebooks for 20, 30 years, and then they sat down one day and they wrote the best-selling book for their industry. It might have been description of a procedural. It might have been something for new people getting in the industry. But it was an instant success because they built not from memory, but from record. Now, it depends on your environment. In some regulatory environments, you cannot document certain things. In some environments, you might want to document certain things to make sure you don't get hung as like Sarbanes-Oxley and different things like that can hold individuals responsible for dumb mistakes companies make. My point being is to gain wealth and influence, to have more control over your environment, to optimize the things around you. Very often it is written systems with constraints. These problems you have are not necessarily bad. The problem is teaching you something. And now if you can communicate what you've learned or help other people overcome the same obstacles and problems, you now take on a different role in society. Rather than being an individual contributor, you become a leader. And then as you develop as a leader, you become a director, you become an executive. You at least have more executive function over yourself because your memory will seem limitless as you've managed your calendar appropriately. Now, there are some drawbacks. How we track this information, how we manage our time, how we communicate matters. I know that podcasting is not the most efficient way to convey information. I get more value out of recording the podcast, later transcribing it, and then turning it into residual materials than I do with the majority of listeners, because the majority of listeners are in their car, they're casually listening, they're doing stuff around the house. Sometimes they don't like my voice. They think I'm too breathy, or they think I don't know what they think. I don't really care, because again, I'm communicating with those people that are interested. I'm speaking with you who wants to increase their influence, who wants career opportunities, who wants a better cash flow in their business, who wants better and more loyal employees, who wants to transform business relationships into profits. I don't want just the people who are monetary profit only, because money is only a medium of exchange. And as we're seeing right now with inflation, that fiat currency has little or no buying power over time. But what has massive buying power over time? Your relationships, your ability to cultivate and organize people for solutions. So what we're doing in our communications is we're connecting with the right people. This podcast may have 1,000 listeners over the lifetime of this podcast, but only a few hundred of them will be using the information, will be interested in additional services or coaching, or buy a book or join a program, because they have that hunger and the ability to apply what they're learning. So we want to speak to those who do rather than those who don't. If you're selling something, you want to speak to the buyers rather than the tire kickers. If you're persuading a team or selling a vision for a company, you want to talk to the individuals who are going to be in there for the long term. Not because they couldn't find a job somewhere else. That's a misnomer in organizations, that seniority means value. Well, seniority might just mean they couldn't find a job anywhere else, and you are stuck with them. Again, clarity, relevance, focus, constraints. Constraints could be just like what I just did. I talked about who I want and who I don't want. I don't want people who are just listening to the podcast and they're just filling in time. I want people that are going places. Somebody who's in their car listening to the podcast between sales appointments and then applying the techniques that they learn. So for example, what we're teaching here is you can restrict your communications and say only the valuable words and spend the majority of your time listening to the other person. This is going to give you valuable information that you're going to record somewhere, and you're going to catalog, and then periodically you're going to review. If the majority of your clients have a certain perspective, you can mention that perspective with more credibility and authority. If your customers are conservative and you're conservative, you got better alignment. If your customers are liberal and you're conservative, you can adjust on similarities and common talking points, vice versa. Do you see where I'm coming from here? Communications is dynamic. Communications is about adapting to your environment. While we have a desire to conform our environment to our needs and desires, sometimes letting go of that control and focusing instead on moving with the tides and rhythms of the environment. I'm not talking about conforming here and losing yourself in what other people want, but finding those strengths, finding those commonalities, understanding where somebody's coming from. Putting this into an environment where of course you can use written materials or recorded materials to syndicate the messages and create influence that way. You can use both written and recorded multimedia materials to generate the evidence of your credibility and your positioning in the marketplace, like I talk about in Establish Instant Credibility. And then you can also use this information to better serve your customers, to create mutual value, and ultimately build the relationships that are necessary so that opportunities come to you. You're communicating who you are, what you believe, and what you do in a hearable way. You're demonstrating the skills and strengths and the ability to solve problems in a hearable way. And then you're also understanding that audience. So, if you have 1,000 people in a room, you're going to talk to the 3 or 4 people that matter both in the mutual value, in the strategic connection, and the long-term impact. Now, we can teach you how to build systems, how to develop methodologies, how to organize, how to automate, how to do these different elements. But if you're not listening to your buyers and those hiring managers and those recruiters who can help you get to where you want to be, and if you don't have the critical thinking necessary to evaluate what you're being taught, because again, when you understand other people, you realize they have their own self-interest and they are manipulating the environment around them as much as you desire to manipulate the environment around you. We can now get that synergy. We can now get that mutual value. We can now connect with the right people and get the results that you're looking for. There's nothing wrong with constraints. And speaking of constraints, I try to keep the newsletters for 15 minutes, so I'm going to wrap it up right now. Are you using the time you have to communicate in a meaningful way? And are you building up a system around your communications so that you say things that are of value to your intended audience and get you the results you're looking for? I certainly hope so, and that's one of the things I'll help you do here at Inside Strategic Relations. I'm Justin Hitt. This is the Inside Strategic Relations podcast, and if you have any questions about what I've covered here or anything in this realm of topic, visit me at www.insidestrategicrelations, where we have coaching programs, a free email newsletter, a contact page to ask questions, and so much more to help you transform business relationships into profits guaranteed. I'm Justin Hitt, and I'll see you in the next episode.